Okay, so the first step in drawing any portrait is that we want to draw a circle. It's important to note here that your circle does not have to be perfect so long as its height is relative to its width. And when it comes to the side oval that we've just placed here, when you're drawing it, I want you to think and keep this in the back of your mind that the top of the oval needs to align with where the hairline of your subject is at, and then the bottom of the oval needs to align roughly where the bottom of the nose would sit on your paper, okay? So then we're going to draw the vertical axis, and then we're going to draw the horizontal axis. We're going to pull our hairline over from the top of the oval. We're going to extend the horizontal axis over for our brow line, and then we are going to draw in and extend the line over from the bottom of the oval for the bottom of our nose. And then this one, we're going to pull that line down on the far side and extend it down to roughly where the chin would be. And then we're going to extend our vertical axis down and then connect that to the bottom of that far side line, which is going to take the place of the center line of the face. Given the nature of the angle, the fact that this is a profile angle, that will pretty much be our center line, okay? And then right here, we're going to place our anchor point for roughly where the top of the upper lip sits. And then we're also going to place the anchor point for where the bottom of our lower lip sits, okay? And I don't think I'm going to place the cheek plane for this one because I don't want there to be confusion between the cheek plane for the Loomis method and then the planes that we place for the Asaro method later on in this tutorial. But then here we're just going to extend this neckline so that we more or less have a chin. Something like that, okay? And then we just want to erase this part of the initial circle of our Loomis head. And that is pretty much the basic framework of the Loomis head for this specific reference photo. This is all you really need to have on your paper. And then what I like to do is I like to start drawing and sketching in the ear of the subject in question. And the reason why I like to start with the ear is because the ear will always be placed in the bottom rear quadrant of the side plane. And when I say rear, of course, I mean rear to the front of the face, right? So once we place the ear just like this, we can then use the ear as a proportional gauge for the rest of the features of our drawing. So something just like this. Again, this is just a basic sketch. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're not looking for details here. We're more or less just looking for basic framework. So now I'm going to actually start sketching this up, right? I'm starting from the ear. And I'm working my way up all the way to roughly where that hairline sits for the Loomis head. And we can actually extend and pull this hair down right here. It's kind of got a wave-like motion coming down off the back of the ear. And then it kind of drapes over the back of the subject's shoulder. But something just like this. I'm just doing nice, light, short pulls. Now, when you're actually holding your paper, you can do this with a 3-point grip, if you will, which of course is the grip that they teach us how to write with in school, or you can actually do the overhand method and you can kind of lightly sketch in your hairlines that way. It's really up to you. Whatever feels the most natural in your hand is what you're going to want to do. Now, when it comes to the far side of the face, given that this is a profile angle, one of the things that you can do, if you will, is you can go through and you can actually start to kind of carve out that outer edge of the subject's face. And you're going to use your nose line from your Loomis head as a basis for exactly where that nose ends and extends down to the top of your upper lip, okay? More or less, I always like to use the term carving out when it comes to profile angles because that's essentially what we're doing. Remember, the Loomis head is essentially your foundational mannequin, right? It is that foundation. That is it. It is nothing more than that. It is just meant to help you place other features. But yeah, and then of course we're just going to go in with an eraser and we're going to erase those lines, something just like this. And that's already looking a lot more like the reference photo than just the basic Loomis head was. And you can go in with a kneaded eraser and you can erase some of these foundational Loomis lines. Typically you can go in and you can erase the entire Loomis head before we actually start sketching in any of the features. But for this one, I wanted to keep that underlying Loomis head so that you could really see how it ties in to the features once we start to place them. But it's really personal preference. And then just like this, I'm going to keep going through and dressing this up and retrieving some of these higher values, all right? And then given the nature of this reference photo, I'm going to start sketching in the hair. Now, hair is tricky. Every subject is going to have different hair, but the principle remains the same. Okay, and that is that you really want to focus heavily on the way that your subject's hair flows. One of the ways that you can accomplish that is that you can draw in and bring out the segments of hair. Now, when I say segments, what I mean is that when you look at hair, hair is comprised, the greater body of hair is comprised of smaller bits of hair. Those bits of hair are what I call segments, and multiple segments will help formulate the greater hair flow for you, okay? So now, what we're going to do is we are going to switch from the Loomis method to the Asaro method. And the reason why we're switching to the Asaro method is because the Asaro method itself is built on facial planes, all right? So the first plane that we want to identify is the nose bridge plane. So we're going to draw a horizontal line, and then we're going to extend a vertical line up, and then from the top of that vertical line, that is going to plug into the corner of the eyebrow of the subject. So once we have that drawn in, we're going to sketch in the basic two-dimensional shape of our subject's eyebrow. Something just like this. All right. Now, once that eyebrow is drawn in, then what we want to do is we want to start sketching in what are known as frame lines. Now, these frame lines enable us to frame the eyes from the top down and really give us a solid structure to work with when it comes to actually where exactly do we place that upper eyelid, right? Which of course is the beginnings of the eye. It's just like this. So as you can see, we drew down that temple plane, which if you refer to the Asaro method, you can clearly see it on the model. That extends down to the upper eyelid. You essentially have 3 different frame lines. You connect all 3 of those frame lines. You connect the bottom as well. And then you're able to sock in your iris and your pupil, and you more or less have the basic framework that you need for your subject's eye. Now, obviously, when you're drawing like this, there is a lot of refinement, right, that needs to go along in order to smooth this out and really hone it in and make it look exactly like your reference photo. But this is the beginning, right? These are the first couple steps. And the whole reason why I'm making these style tutorials for you guys is so that you understand the initial steps. Now, as far as the nose goes, we want to extend this bottom plane up from the underlying Loomis head nose line, okay? So if you look at the Asaro head model, you can clearly see the plane that we're bringing out in regards to our reference photo. So we're drawing this in. We have a couple different planes here because obviously the angle is slightly looking towards us, but not by much. So once we have those planes placed, then we want to punch in the nostril. This plane here that we're drawing in, you can barely see it on the Asaro head model, but what this is the nose ridge plane. The ridge plane plugs into the bridge plane. Bridge and ridge. They're similar, but they're different, so make sure that you understand what that difference is. Okay. But something just like that, and this will give you the basic structure for the nose here. But yeah, that's looking pretty solid. Then this plane right here, what this is this is what's known as the slope plane. And the slope plane slopes from the ridge plane, right? The ridge is at the top, and then it slopes down to the bottom, right? Just like that. Now, here, extending from the bottom of the nose, we're going to pull this line down. And what this line is this is representative of the philtrum plane. Then here, we're going to identify the corner of the mouth. We're going to extend a line up to the bottom of the philtrum, which is known as the Cupid's bow. Now, the Cupid's bow more or less forms the top of a heart at the top center of the upper lip, and that is why they call it the Cupid's bow, right? Cupid shooting his little arrows into your heart, making you fall in love. That's what this is all about here. Now, we have this line, and we're going to pull this over. All right, that's going to show us the bottom, and then we're going to extend this line over from the corner of the mouth, and that brings out the upper lip. We're going to split that upper lip into two planes. You can't really see it on the Asaro head model, but that front lip is comprised of two planes, and that bottom lip is comprised of three planes. But here, we pretty much have the lips established. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dress up this portrait because for the most part, that is the foundation of the profile of this specific subject. But here I'm just going to punch in her shirt, and then I want to bring out a little bit more hair as well. Profile angles, believe it or not, are actually one of the more simplistic angles that you can draw whenever you're drawing someone, because you only have to deal with one side of the face, and you don't have to worry about symmetry so much. When you think about it, when you split a face down the middle, there's two eyes, there's two sides of a nose, there's two sides of lips, there's two sides to the face in general. So now when you see these planes here that I'm sketching in, these are the Asaro planes. When you look at the Asaro head model, refer to that, okay? Because that is what I am using as my basis for when I'm placing these facial planes. Now, you don't have to do this if you don't want to with your portrait sketch, but I think that it is very, very important for you to start analyzing this method and sketching these planes in for your portraits, because all it's going to do is help you. It's not going to hurt you. And when it comes to your basic sketches, before you start to hatch and cross hatch and shade and blend and do all the things, is that it's going to make you start to think about that three-dimensional form in 2D space. Because if you don't start shading like it's three-dimensional, given that the photo is of a three-dimensional subject, then it's not going to look nearly as realistic as it could. So this is something to consider, and it's something to think about, especially if the Asaro method is fairly new to you. So now here, I'm just going to go in while we're here, and I'm going to start bringing out those different segments of hair so that rather than having just that basic outer shape of the hair, we can start to bring out the shape and that flow of the hair for this specific reference photo. Okay. It's important to note here that you can add as little or as much of these lines as you will. I've always said that less is more, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about the segments of hair or if we're talking about the different Asaro planes that you're sketching into your portrait. Less is always going to be more. So, and then here I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to draw these lines here for the eyebrow, and notice the direction that I'm pulling for these lines. As time progresses, I'm going to start adding more and more details to these tutorials for you guys. I just want to make absolutely certain that I drive home the foundational approach of how we start to draw these portraits, right? Because if you can't do step 1 or 2, then you're definitely not going to be able to do step 7 or 8. And even if you can do step 7 or 8, because you couldn't do 1 or 2, it's not going to look proportionally accurate to the reference photo. So everything is very logistical. Lots of people don't like to draw this way because they think it's very formulaic, right? That it is not artistic, but it's extremely artistic in the sense that it's just been analyzed over and over and over again and curated and refined so that it's easy to digest. So that's it for this one. Stay happy, stay healthy, and remember, never stop drawing.